Hello and welcome to AACRAO Town Hall 2025 Budget Webinar. We are glad you're able to join us today. Before we get started, I would like to remind everyone that today's webinar will be recorded and it will be on our AACRAO website shortly. Please feel free to turn on closed captions, and also please feel free to use the Q&A feature to ask your questions. You can ask your questions at any time, and you can ask your questions anonymously. Melanie will be monitoring the Q&A, and the questions will be answered towards the end. And without any further ado, I would like to hand it over to our president, Christy Wold-McCormick. Thank you, Christy.
Thank you, Belma. Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the AACRAO Town Hall on the fiscal year 2025 budget. I hope you've all had an enjoyable summer thus far and that you are feeling prepared for the new academic year that is just around the corner. Per the bylaws changes that were approved at the 2023 annual meeting, we're sharing with you today the proposed budget in order for transparency and to provide members an opportunity to ask questions and offer feedback. Allowing the AACRAO staff to set the budget and for the board to approve it closer to the implementation when our fiscal year begins in October aligns with leading association practices. This timeline also helps make budgeting more accurate, timely, and reflective of our priorities, strategic plan, and external dynamics that we may not always be able to anticipate. Throughout the presentation, you are welcome to put questions in the Q&A feature. We will be monitoring those, and as mentioned, we'll also leave some time at the end for questions. Before we dive into the proposed budget details, I'd like to introduce my co-panelists today who are instrumental in overseeing the development, monitoring, and management of AACRAO's budget and financial health. First, Melanie Gottlieb has served as AACRAO's Executive Director since March 2022. Ari Kaufman is in his third year as the Vice President for Finance on the AACRAO Board of Directors and chairs the Finance, Investment, and Audit Committee. I'm now going to turn it over to Ari.
Thank you, Christy, and hello, everyone. The detailed work of the budget is reviewed in the Finance, Investments, and Audit Committee of the Board of Directors. This committee works closely with Melanie, Martha Hennerby, the Associate Executive Director for Operations, and Fred Magdog, our CFO. The members of the FI&A committee, as you can see, are myself as the chair, Christy Wold-McCormick, Cassandra Moore, Chris Wong, Carrie Jeffers, and Melissa Manuel. Special recognition to Melissa of Nam University, who is the external member at large on the FI&A committee. For audit purposes, we are required to have a non-board member as part of this committee. The board of directors ultimately approves the budget, but to ensure transparency and to allow an opportunity for feedback, we share the budget with members during a town hall meeting such as this one. We will consider any feedback from members, make necessary adjustments to the draft budget in coordination with Melanie, and send it for board approval at the August board meeting for an October 1st implementation. Our executive director, Melanie, along with her team, have built this year's draft budget over the last several months. She presented the draft budget to the FI&A committee, and we will have one more opportunity as a committee to discuss it in early August before the board meeting later in the same month. Next slide. Okay. Great. Here are the broad details of the fiscal year 2025 budget. While the income is fairly close to last year, the expenses are a bit higher, which results in a slightly tighter margin. This is due to a number of things. Our dues income is projected to be approximately $250,000 lower than in previous years to make accommodations and adjustments to the new dues model to ensure that as many institutions have access to membership as possible. Expenses, particularly around the costs of technology and our meetings, continue to rise higher than our registration costs, which shrinks our overall profitability. Despite this, we believe that this budget strikes a proper balance between serving member needs and maintaining a positive cash flow for the association. The staff is working to identify additional areas where we can cut costs without compromising member services. I will now review some of the background of these numbers. This next slide is AACRAO revenues. AACRAO has several distinct revenue streams. Having this diversity of revenue sources helps ensure the financial stability of AACRAO, and AACRAO is unique among similar professional organizations because of our diverse revenue streams. Our main sources of revenue are membership dues, which comprise just over 24% of our revenue, registrations for our various meetings and conferences, which comprise 23.6% of our revenues, service fees, comprising 18.2% of our revenues. Service fees include revenue from AACRAO Consulting, as well as the crucial role AACRAO fulfills for the Law School Admissions Council, LSAC. AACRAO is responsible for evaluating all international transcripts for applicants that use the LSAC Common App. Grant income, 17%. This revenue includes what we receive as grant income as well as research performed to help other organizations with their grants. We work with a number of foundations, including Ascendium, Walmart, Strata, Gates, Lumina, and others on a variety of projects that support the advancement of higher education and the learners we all serve. The remaining sources of revenue include exhibit fees, sponsorships, publications including EDGE, and AACRAO Jobs advertising. The next slide is a summary of our AACRAO expenses. Our main expenses are personnel at 42%, which includes wages, payroll taxes, and benefits. Events and travel at 22.6%, which includes all the costs of running our various meetings and events, including meals, lodging, travel, facilities, and technology. This also includes other travel by AACRAO staff and leadership, including visits to our state and regional meetings. These costs continue to rise. This year's figures are approximately 3% higher across the board this year. Outsourcing services at 19%, which includes all of our outsourced accounting, HR, and legal functions, as well as anyone who is compensated through 1099s, including our AACRAO consultants and our LSAC transcript evaluators. Technology at 5.9%, which includes all the technology we use to support our organization and our membership, including Zoom, accounting software, membership software, and many other technologies. The DC office at 5.1% of our expenses. These are the costs associated with owning our building at 1108 16th Street Northwest in Washington, D.C. Other expenses at 5.4% include marketing expenses, postage, etc. The next slide just gives an overall 5-year review of our revenues and expenses. And as you can see, during COVID, obviously, we had less going on, so we had a little bit of a drop for those 2 years. But over the past 5 years, and you can see our revenues and expenses have been steadily increasing over the past 3 years, and both are expected to increase again this year. Next slide, please. This year, the FI&A Committee and the board took a number of steps to consider our investment earnings, which were $1.6 million over the past year, and how we might begin to use them more strategically to reinvest in the association. As a nonprofit, it is important that once we reach a comfortable investment portfolio milestone, we consider reinvesting in ourselves to fund both maintenance expenses as well as expenses that are tied to innovation and to our strategic plan. This year, the board worked to prepare to do this by revising the investment policy to accommodate the current environment and investment fund levels. We also have made plans to make a large payment towards the bond on our building, as well as several other key strategic spends. What is a strategic spend? The new investment policy is paired with the new strategic spending policy that was adopted by the board in January of this year. The policy allows the staff to request that in any given fiscal year, up to 25% of excess reserves be added to the following year's budget. Best practice in the association nonprofit world suggests that an association maintain at least 50% of the operating budget in reserve. AACRAO has set our reserve goal at 66%. That means at our current portfolio value of $10,716,000, we would have approximately $500,000 available for strategic spending requests. I now turn this over to Melanie.
Next slide, please. Thanks, Ari. All right, so the strategic spending policy allows for spending in 2 categories. The first category is capital improvements, which includes investments in equipment and hardware that enhance operational efficiency or support our organization's core functions, or also investment in software solutions that improve our processes or support our strategic initiatives. It also allows us to spend on maintenance and upgrades, which might include items that would be needed for the property at 1108 16th Street Northwest here in Washington, D.C. We have a responsibility to protect and maintain the value of the national office and to ensure a safe and productive work environment for the AACRAO staff. The second category of strategic spending is for innovation and development. This might include funds to develop new programs or to replace outdated ones, all aligning with AACRAO's mission and strategic goals. Or it might include investments in initiatives that expand AACRAO's interests and services, increasing member value, or fostering growth and relevance in our fields. Under this category, we can request to invest in new revenue producing opportunities that align with the mission and our long-term sustainability. This is a chart that shows our strategic spending requests and approvals by the financial and by the FI&A committee this year. They total $380,000. The first one is, and the largest one, is website redevelopment. And this is phase one of what is likely to be a two-phase process. Our website is about 6 to 7 years old. We launched the current website at the time that we purchased the building, and it is time for a refresh. There are a number of ways that we need to think about the website. We need to do some refreshed branding. We need to reorganize the site around our research and around our learning mobility agenda. There's lots of new technology available, and we need to be thinking about how we might incorporate AI tools and how we might improve member tools and resources. This investment it would fall into the capital improvement and software acquisition, and also somewhat into a maintenance and upgrade category. And it ties directly with goal number 4 of our strategic plan, which is around reimagining community and engagement. The second item that we're really excited about is Canvas integration. This year, we've been able to negotiate a deal with the Instructure Corporation, which owns Canvas, the Canvas LMS platform that many of you have on your campuses, to give us a free license to an instance of Canvas. That free license will save us ultimately a fair amount of dollars for our current LMS software and our current badging software. But in order to make it really effective, we will need to integrate it with our Salesforce platform. And those integration costs are not inexpensive. It's about $60,000. We're really excited, though, about this investment because it will lead to a greatly improved member course environment and experience. And it's directly tied to goal number 3, which is around creating credentialed career pathways for our professions. So this tool will will advance us quite far in reaching that goal. The next item is around project management. We do not have a project manager on staff, and we are fairly lean for the number of items that the number of projects we engage in. And we just need some additional support to make sure that we are getting things done in an integrated and timely manner. And then the last item is a small item, but a necessary item, and that's around equipment upgrades. We purchased all of our desktops and our laptops when we purchased the building. And so they're more than 6 years old, and it is time to start replacing them. We began those replacements this year, and we funded them directly out of the budget. But as you can see, the margin in the budget this upcoming year is going to be much tighter. So we're going to need to be looking at spending a little bit of our reserves in order to do equipment upgrades. Now I'm going to turn it over to Christy to talk a little bit about what's next and how this is all going to work.
Thank you, Melanie. So yeah, what is next? As you can see on the slide here, the FI&A committee is going to meet again in August for the third time to discuss this budget process. At that time, the committee will finalize the budget with Melanie and the AACRAO team and bring it to the full board for a discussion and vote at our August meeting. The staff will then work to implement the budget for our October 1st fiscal year start. So that is why we wanted to bring this information to you now, so we had time to answer questions, hear your feedback before the committee and the board go into those final stages. At this point, I'd like to thank Melanie and Ari for outlining our proposed budget and timeline, and we'd now like to take a few minutes to respond to any remaining questions that members may still have that have not been addressed in the Q&A feature.
I would encourage anyone who has a question to pop it into the Q&A function, and I'll give people a little bit of time to do that. As a reminder, this is something that we have not, this is only the second time that we have done this, but we do this in order to make sure that members have as much transparency into the budget process as possible. Okay, we do have a couple of questions. Let's see. Sorry if I missed this earlier, but should substantial budget changes be made at the board meeting, will those subsequently be communicated to the membership? I can answer that and tell you that we do publish our budget to the member site, and so absolutely you would see those changes. We don't anticipate any large changes. We've really been working this very, very closely over the last couple of months, and I don't anticipate big changes, but you will find that. Let's see. So then there's a couple of questions about the due fees structure and management of dues for small institutions. So for small institutions, you know that last year when we changed the dues structure, we did make some accommodations for smaller institutions. And we will be having a webinar in September, and we haven't set that date yet, talking about the permanent structure for smaller institutions. And so I don't have anything to share in this particular webinar tied to the budget, but we do have a number of items that we have been working on and will be communicating to the small colleges after the August board meeting. So it'll probably be in September is when we'll get that webinar going. And let's see what else we have. Yes. So yes, published material. Yes, we will on the member site on this. Really right now, if you look on the webinar page, there is the current outline of the budget. It's sort of the top view of the budget, and you can see that there. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, and there is, I see one question in the chat. Have you considered increasing dues registration costs to compensate for these leaner margins? We are not anticipating raising dues any more than we tend to raise them. We always, we have a provision that allows the board to adjust dues on an annual basis up to the CPI. And so we don't anticipate making any other changes to the dues structure. There may be some registration charges that will go up. Not sure yet. We are still working on those. Right now, we are doing everything we can to keep costs under control so that we are not raising fees in a high way. I do want to say if you have questions, it would be great to put them in the Q&A. It's a little easier for us to see them. So thanks. Thanks, Rhonda. Rhonda's giving a shout out in the chat. We are really working hard to be as transparent as we possibly can be. Any other questions? Looks like, wait, there might be one more. Not a question, but a comment. Really appreciate AACRAO embracing an agile approach to finances and communication to members. Thanks, Mark. We appreciate that.
And again, we're really happy that we're able to have the budget closer to the beginning of the fiscal year now, to give extra time to make it a more useful budget, that's more relevant to what actually happens during the year. And we appreciate the message. Yeah.
Thanks. There is a question in the chat that I will read out, asking, are we experiencing any challenges in retaining staff? I will say, actually, we are not. We have a very solid staff. We, I think, are currently hiring for one role. We may possibly be hiring for a second in the fall, but we aren't having any staff retention policies. Around staff, we tend to pay staff at the median for the DC market in association work tied to their roles. And honestly, it's not a bad place to work. That's what I hear.
Do we have any more questions? Seeing no more, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I would like to take a moment to thank all of you for joining us today to learn more about the AACRAO fiscal year 2025 budget. If you think of additional questions after we conclude today, feel free to send them to Ari's email as shown on the slide, and he will respond accordingly or reach out to the AACRAO staff if they are better to respond to your questions. But in the meantime, we look forward to engaging with all of you in the coming year through a variety of professional development and networking opportunities that the AACRAO staff and volunteer members have planned for us. So thank you again for attending today's webinar and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.